So should we start all over again?
Yes, please.
Now there's no guessing what the first question is. There's no way I'm going to change it to anything else, so let me just repeat myself. Vasu, this is a fascinating book. I read it with enormous interest, cover to cover. It is, I think, compulsory reading for those who want to know and understand, and almost obligatory for those who don't want to see and know the truth, never to read the book. Because if the second lot read it, I can guarantee that it will shatter their false illusions completely. And that made me think, what made you write this book?
Karan, thanks for that very generous introduction. Before I start, I'm just going to take 10 seconds. This won't be an Oscar acceptance speech. But I just want to very quickly thank Aleph Publishers for agreeing to print this book in perhaps a momentary brain fade at a time like this. Also to all of those whose journalism in a way has informed this book, and many of whom are gathered here and some aren't. These are fellow reporters, editors, overworked producers, instigators, and of course special word of thanks to Supriya Kumar, a fabulous researcher and reporter who works on this book. So, thank you. Sorry, now, why this book? Karan, this book was a reaction really to this phenomenon which has been sweeping India in the past 10 years. Literary festivals, Litfest. We basically wanted to get into them. I did, and then it turned out they did as well. Why should Shashi Tharoor have all the fun? And it's going quite well, by the way. We were at Chennai, Jaipur is next, and then Kerala later this month. But on a more serious note, the fact is that falsehood, lies, are not limited to any ideological formation or political party or government. This is true through time. But something visibly has worsened in the past decade. And that's not just me saying it. The World Economic Forum has recently certified that India is a Vishwa Guru when it comes to fake news. We're ranked number one in terms of the greatest threat when it comes to false information. Now, there are different kinds of falsehoods to choose from. As an author or as a journalist, we're blessed to have this rich buffet of options. This could amount to massaging economic data, or it could be something like claiming that the 2,000 rupee note is embedded with a nano GPS chip. But we chose these particular sets of, whether you call them falsehoods or half-truths or dangerous, divisive propaganda, because of the threat that they pose to Indian society. While some of these other forms of being creative with facts is not great for us, but this, we felt, was dividing India, was sowing hate, was having real-world consequences, especially for Indian minorities, Muslims and Christians and so on. And what made it worse was that these were being amplified at the highest level. These were being amplified by ministers, chief ministers, MPs, MLAs, right all the way to the top, as we've chronicled in the book. Not just that, Karan, many of these fictions, so to speak, have actually been passed into law. As we call it, today's WhatsApp forward, tomorrow's law. I'll just wrap by giving you the example of Love Jihad, which is there on the sort of the cover of the book. Now, the Home Ministry has said that Love Jihad is not a category under the law, but multiple Indian states have passed anti-Love Jihad laws. One of them is Uttar Pradesh. They passed the law, I believe, in 2020. And in that time, they have proudly claimed to have registered at least 500 cases under this law, essentially criminalizing interfaith relationships. Now, interfaith marriages, relationships in this country amount to just 2%, right? It's an extraordinarily fragile but beautiful institution for a country like ours, that you can have people across faiths marrying each other, but it's a very, very slim sliver. Now, just this fragile little island of hope is under serious assault. 500 cases means dozens and dozens of Hindu-Muslim couples have had their marriages disrupted. Muslims have been jailed, Muslim male partner has been jailed, and their lives upturned. So our idea was to put together something which acts as a sort of handy guide for those who may be interested in pushing back against this tidal wave of divisive falsehoods, whether you're a citizen, whether you're a journalist, whether you're in the world of politics, that when you're confronted with this, you have a sort of one-stop text which you can refer to do your little bit in countering this very dangerous phenomenon which is engulfing us.
You know, one of the most impressive things about this book is the depth and the extent of research that you've done. You've researched in the field, you've researched in newspaper archives. How onerous was it, Supriya?
Well, Karan, I just first like to add to what Vasu said about why we wrote the book. Vasu rightly emphasized on how we felt it was important to take on these conspiracy theories because they are coming from a place of power. But personally, what mattered to me was that these are now also coming from a place of intimacy. I wasn't initially part of this book project, it was Vasu and Mariam. Since we are friends, I heard about it, and I still remember my first reaction was, please write this book quickly because I know lots of people I'd like to give this to. And that's actually the unfortunate part, that even in our most intimate spaces, among friends, families, neighbors, we are drawn into these rather acrimonious debates now on what are entirely fictional constructs, but because they are being said over and over again, not just by people in power, but also by people we know. The old classmate that we used to hang out with, that we've reconnected on Facebook, the kind neighbor who walks the dog and then slips in a message on the RW WhatsApp group. It's because it's coming from this intimate circle. It's produced this echo chamber effect where more and more well-meaning, sensible people are falling for these falsehoods, or at the very least, they're thinking, kuch to hoga, there must be something to it. And so it wasn't just an act of, a journalist's act of setting the record straight, but also, a very human need to communicate across what now seems like an impregnable divide. So that's actually one of the reasons why I got on board this project. And actually, it isn't the case that journalists haven't been calling these falsehoods out. In fact, it's remarkable that across the country, so many reporters have gone down to investigate specific instances, for instance, of an interfaith couple that's being hounded under the rubric of love jihad, or a voluntary act of religious conversion which is being mislabeled as forced conversion and like a mob showing up outside a prayer hall. But it's the nature of the news cycle. It's transient, it's fleeting, it's episodic, and therefore we thought that putting the book together would be useful. But because there has been some work done by reporters out in the field, we have relied a lot on the work done by our community, and to that we have added our bit. We've gone and done original reporting. For instance, Love Jihad first surfaced in Kerala in 2009 in a case that went to the Kerala High Court. And that case is widely cited by the right wing to sort of buttress its claims of Love Jihad, that the Kerala High Court has said that there is an organized Muslim movement to convert Hindu women. And so we actually pursued that case. And even in 2009, well before we had the current regime in power, there weren't really, in that sense, a very rigorous examination of that case. And so we went, we sort of got through the entire case file, and we traced the key protagonist, the Muslim man who was accused of love jihad in that instance. And he hadn't ever had a chance of telling his story. So he spoke to us. We also met, a judge of the High Court who said something very revelatory. And I hope, all of you get to read the book, because that is actually a pretty striking moment where a retired High Court judge decides to open up with a journalist he's never met before to say that he regrets that he did not write a judgment. He only left an order because it's not now become part of, case law precedent. It's not being cited in the courts. So we did that. We trawled through parliamentary records. We used RTI. We traveled. Mariam went to Karnataka to pursue, these so-called cases of forced conversion. So we used, the wide array of journalistic tools, just the way that we would for investigating, corruption. We decided that what we want to produce is a book that is shorn of polemic, that just stacks up the facts in a way that those who are still ambivalent about this will be able to see the evidence for themselves.
You know, Supriya, I'm going to quote at this point and put this to Myron from your epilogue. From your prologue. This is what you write about the intimate manner in which this actually seeps into society. You say the source could be a neighbor, a friend, a colleague, an ex-classmate or a relative, which creates an illusion of intimate endorsement. Courtesy this subterfuge, the narrative these theories push has seeped into the bones of our society, almost becoming the common sense of our time. This is not just particularly disturbing, it's particularly difficult to combat. When your nearest and dearest believe this rubbish, it's very hard to persuade them of the opposite.
So Karan, as journalists, I think journalism 101 is that journalists are never the story, we are never the story. But because of my name, a lot of these myths that we're busting is a lived reality for not just me, for people I know, people I see in very intimate circles. And it's also exploded so much after 2014 because, like you quoted, it's your old WhatsApp school groups or college groups have become sort of like full of landmines. You're not sure who's going to say what, how do you respond to that, what it means, and it's that kind of, that kind of immediacy and that kind of, everything is so very close to you, it gets you after a point. And because of which, for me personally, this book is not just a journalistic endeavor, which it is, but at the same time, it's something that I felt like I needed to do because it was for me and for others like me. If we needed a future in this country, in a stable future, it had to be done.
Let's come, Shashi, to the themes they talk about. There are 5 in particular: love jihad, population jihad, Muslim appeasement, forced conversion, and then in the epilogue, they also talk about what's come to be called the Pink Revolution. I was particularly impressed in that chapter on love jihad in the way they debunked the BHP's list of 147 cases. The book says this is the only comprehensive document on love jihad, and they comprehensively debunked it. What did you think of that?
I liked it very much. In fact, I was going to say one of the most impressive things, and I think Karan's already mentioned this, is the meticulousness of the research. And they've actually gone and looked into very specific cases where people were willing to talk to them. And so many of the cases that made lurid headlines and showed up on all our WhatsApps are debunked extremely in calm, moderate language, but with actual facts and figures and quotes from the people concerned. And when it comes to larger statistical issues, as in the population jihad chapter, they've done it with very thorough social science research. This is an extremely unusual work in the Indian context because we tend, and I'm probably guilty of it too, of using information without substantiation of this kind of detailed sourcing nature. This is like a reference book. It's small and slight, and it doesn't look like something you would go to a library to find. And Supriya said she'd be starting to gift it to friends. But in fact, everything is very, very detailed, and I love the way you presented it. Chapeau to the publishers, who happen to be my publishers too, but that's not why I'm saying it. You rarely find a book that is illustrated with everything from pictures of WhatsApp forwards, internet memes, very detailed graphs and charts that have been explained very lucidly. And I think these are the things that really matter. Now, on Love Jihad, Karan, one of the things that was striking was they also debunked particularly the argument that it was actually Kerala Christians who sort of came up with the theory of love jihad. So it's not a Hindutva paranoia, it's a Kerala Christian thing. And they've gone into this in detail, and they've actually looked at the specific references. They even looked at the police cases that were, because the DGP of police, whom I happen to know, had actually asked every one of the 14 districts in Kerala to give a report on what they could find about this. And he found 12 of the 14 actually didn't find any example of love jihad at all. And the other 2 had some very dubious sourcings. So the DGP, who himself is Christian, or the then DGP, did not make very much of all of this, understandably. But anyway, I mean, the fact is, look, there are people with points of view in our society. And as Democrats and as journalists, we, all of you certainly have to live with a certain amount of misinformation. But a systematic attempt to debunk that is an incredibly valuable public service. It may not, in the end, reach as many people as those misleading WhatsApp forwards do, but at least the alternatives are there. Maybe you ought to get this book sort of redone as a series of WhatsApp forwards.
Owaisi Sahib, as belief in the veracity of love jihad spread, various state governments came up with anti-conversion laws, which bizarrely, by the way, were called Freedom of Religion Act. I'm going to quote to you from the law in Uttarakhand, which specifically says, people do marry girls of other religions by misrepresentation of their own religion, and after getting married to such girls, they get them converted to their own religion. What do you make of this exaggerated and totally unjustified response from Uttarakhand?
Well, I think so. You should add the recently passed laws in the parliament to replace IPC, CRPC also have the same provision of love jihad. And Shashi, I don't know why you're answering, but unfortunately this has the same provision of deceiving someone. In fact, it also says that if you use one name and your name is different, you can still be charged for an offence, and the punishment can be 10 years. So I find it, not only strange, but it is unconstitutional. It violates right to privacy of the Puttaswamy judgment. But that is what BJP is doing, and unfortunately, what we have failed is. I don't know whether this book will stop the Hindutva adherents of Hindutva ideology in spreading lies and hate and fiction. What can stop Hindutva and Sangh Parivar and BJP is a counter narrative. We don't have a counter narrative. We don't have ways to put forward. I'm deliberately using this word propaganda. And it is not the job of these three authors to stop these fascists, but it is the job of political parties, like a smaller political party like me, and the grand old party which Shashi Tharoor represents, that we have failed. And I don't know how we'll be able to do it, but we need a counter narrative, we need a propaganda, we need to take them on politically as well, which unfortunately which we're not able to do. For example, take the case of Karnataka. Congress is in power for 8 months. Who stopped them from issuing an order wherein you allow Muslim girls to wear hijab? Who stopped them from repealing these laws? So we don't do it. Why? Because we need the Hindu vote, and the Hindu vote has become so important that every party wants to follow the narrative that is set by Narendra Modi. Simple as that.
Brita Global, we don't have a counter narrative, but there are small steps that we can take that could help couples of interreligious faith who want to get married to each other. At the moment, if they opt for the Special Marriages Act, they're required to give advance notice, and that immediately attracts vilification and the attacks from the Hindutva group. Shouldn't that particular clause in the Special Marriages Act, and this is a point that the authors make in their book, be scrapped immediately?
Yes, Karan, may I first congratulate Vasu, Mariam and Supriya for a very important book, highly readable, and I would urge the publishers to please translate it so that it becomes even more accessible. Before I answer you, so all our RTIs, etc., they say we don't have any data on love jihad. Somehow the truth has a habit of spilling out. This is the UP, they don't call it freedom of religion in UP, they call it Prohibition of Unlawful Conversion of Religion Act 2021. This is their own government of UP's publication. If you read the little fine print here, this is by the UP state government ministry publication, and in fine print it says Love Jihad 2021 Adhiniyam. And you can go horse asking them, and they say this has nothing to do with Love Jihad. This is all about freedom of ensuring there is no unlawful conversion. And of course, how can anybody say that it's all right to have unlawful, forceful, coercive, fraudulent conversion? But the law, when published by the government of UP, actually has at the bottom page of the entire legislation it says Love Jihad Adhiniyam 2021. So it's interesting that the UP state does consider it a Love Jihad Adhiniyam. And therefore coming to the question of the Special Marriage Act. And I think here it's important to emphasize that what really is there are multiple agendas, but one core issue behind these anti-conversion laws is of course this whole to continue the bogey of conversions taking place in very dubious ways, but also to control women. This is about controlling women's sexuality, women's autonomy, and women's freedom. So you cannot on one hand be saying, all manner of stupid slogans which I don't even think we should keep repeating and validating them, which are being given for women, and at the same time at the heart of this is about controlling women and what they will do and how they will exercise, particularly their sexual autonomy, and therefore how the entire religious markers will be maintained. And that's what the Special Marriage Act seeks to breach actually, by allowing interfaith marriage. And the fact that the 30-day notice put up publicly, sent to parents' home is obviously a trigger, has been challenged in many high courts. Delhi High Court long ago gave a very good judgment saying, do not send this to parents, it does not need to be publicly posted. Kerala High Court has recently said similarly. It was also part of the issues that came up in the challenge in the marriage equality, the same-sex petitions recently adjudicated by the Supreme Court, where the court said this is an issue before another bench. And I think what we need to remind ourselves also, all these so-called Freedom of Religion Acts, 11 of them, today their constitutionality has been challenged by many of us before the Supreme Court. We also asked the Supreme Court to at least stay the operation because they lead to arrests on the ground, because they lead to couples being separated, women being forcefully married. The Supreme Court has not stayed the operation, and nor is there, we do not know when the matter will be heard. The Special Marriage Act, whether this 30-day is mandatory across the country, again a matter before the Supreme Court, I would imagine, impacts the lives of the entire youth population of this country and their exercise of freedom, but not a matter that we see anytime soon being heard.
So let's come to population jihad. In your book,